Rumors Are True listeners, if you'd like to add me on Instagram and Facebook, it is at the Rumors Are True cast. If you'd like to like and subscribe, feel free, you know what to do. If not, no matter what, I really appreciate you listening. So, again, if you'd like to add me, you know the drill. If you'd like to subscribe, you know it even better. Thank you, guys.
Welcome, it's Jeremy Allen Gould. I'm coming to you today to confirm between God and of man that in fact, the rumors that you have all heard are true. I started this podcast because I freaking love music. I was privileged enough to book amazing artists and bands in the past, and I was lucky enough to stay in touch with many of them to this day. This is a place to hear their stories. Thank you so much for riding along on this journey, and I hope you enjoy what you hear. With that said, the rumors are definitely true.
There are places some of us can't face yet, and even though we see it, we just swear God's sleeping. So we say ash to ash and dust to dust. We're all gonna die, so we have to trust in something. No, it might be nothing, but it's gotta be something. Now we meet it in our homes where we're sleeping. We call it mattresses underwater, the gutters are seeping. So we say ask and ask, and we'll return the same old favors till it's all in turn. We got ash in our pockets and dust in the air. Another 40 years for you and yours to run. Love was made like some ship out there, never too serious. We'll probably all crash and run when we see it.
Hey, welcome back to this latest episode of the Rumors Are True podcast. My name is Jeremy, and today I welcome Drew Mellon. You know Drew from the bands Color Revolt, Fletcher, and Don Quixote's Horse. Drew and I have an awesome conversation about his intro into music, as well as the bands he's been in and the records he's played on. An awesome conversation with a very, very cool person. So I hope you enjoy this latest episode with Drew Mellon.
And we say
Hey Drew, what is going on, my friend? Thank you for joining my podcast.
Hey man, how's it going? It's great to be here.
Awesome, it's going really well, man. I appreciate you being on and really looking forward to this conversation, man. What do you got going on in your life currently? Tell me what's going on in your world.
Yeah, I'm currently the COO of a company called Swallophonic. It's a retail store here in Fondren. It's the art district of Jackson, Mississippi. We do sneakers, skateboards, men's and women's clothing, a bunch of stuff like that. It's a lot of fun just to kind of create and problem solve and figure things out. I really enjoy that aspect of it. And then I'm a dad. I've got a 3-year-old going on 4 before it's long, and that's most of my life is, everything involved in that. It's definitely the funnest / most important part of my life right now that
Yeah.
I enjoy. My daughter's name is May, and she's hilarious and lively.
Yeah.
Very, very, very sweet. So she's a joy to be around. That's the most important thing I have in my
That's
life.
awesome. I love that, man. That's amazing. It's funny how, we all kind of grow up and we're, get obsessed with music or get obsessed with records. And then you get to this point in your life and you're like, well, this might not be the most important thing. This might not be, what I should be doing. I should be, loving my family and spending time with my family,
And it's been fun to introduce her to music and just see what
Yeah.
she connects with. And my wife's got a very eclectic music taste and, loves to share stuff too. So it's fun to watch her enjoy things. And then, like Wheels on the Bus or something like that. At the end of the day, she's like, yeah, I'm going to listen to this.
I need the Wiggles on right now.
We got her one of those Loog 3-string guitars for Christmas.
Oh, that's cool.
So she can kind of jam with me, and it's pretty fun.
That's really cool.
She's just making noise, but that's where it all starts.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know the influence. It's kind of one of those things, where, which I was going to bring up next. Let's talk about growing up for you, kind of how music came into your life specifically. Maybe some records, bands, influences. Yeah, let's talk about that.
I think like my first kind of recollection of music is really my sister, who is she was a songwriter in Nashville for most of my kind of formative years. She was writing country music in Nashville, and she's doesn't play any instruments, but her thing was lyrics. She's a lyricist, so that was her role. But it was all country music, and so 90s country, Vince Gill, Garth Brooks, that whole Clint Black, like all this old 90s iconic kind of.
Sure.
Not that she worked with them, but she introduced them to me to them. I saw Willie Nelson a few months ago. He was 90 years old and still, out there doing it.
Awesome.
And I got to see him with her in Nashville when I was probably like 10. So
Wow, that's so cool.
there's kind of that through line of just like, oh, this is cool. Like people were on stage playing instruments and all these people were standing there watching them. And I always kind of connected with being on a stage, like even if it was like little choir concerts or whatever, I was completely comfortable. Like there was never really a point where I was like nervous or scared to be up there. I was like, yeah, this is cool. Like, what are y'all worried about? Like, this is fun. It's just, it was like energizing for me. I loved having a crowd. As a kid, we would make up, fake bands with the drumsticks. I don't know if you remember. I can't remember what they were called. It was just like 2 drumsticks. Everything was wired back then, connected to a little pack.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, like that. It was like a little snare sound. And so, like, my neighborhood friends and I made up a little country band. And that was our drummer. I was just playing one of those little, I can't remember, but they were, fun.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, I mean, music was always kind of like a joy for me, something that I cared about and wanted to do, in any form. And then when it became more, I guess, concrete, we had bands, they were never really did anything, but where it became really more real was I was a super huge youth group kid growing up.
Same here, buddy. Same
here. I mean, that was the center of my world. And looking back on it as a 40-year-old now, I can kind of see the absolute benefits and positives. And then I can, objectively look at it and say, well, there's some things that were kind of sketchy.
Sure.
And made me, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about some of my attitude because at times I felt like it made me feel better than a lot of people. And that was something I had to kind of shake off because that was, very false. But so much of growing up in that world was positive for me. And the biggest one was when I was in junior high, we had a youth minister who was just like, well, we're going to have a youth band now. And we were like completely forward that they would, throw that to us. That felt like something you needed, a more grown person to do, but then they were going to just hand it over to us. So there was two high school guys who, one played bass, one played drums, and I had a guitar, like kind of how to play some chords. And so they were just like, yeah, you're going to play guitar. We really want you to play guitar. So it was these two like very cool, older, pretty good musician dudes who were like, yeah, you're gonna do this too. And so that was a long way for me, giving me confidence, and I've always been one to kind of just like go for it.
Sure.
Whether the ability was fully there or not. And that kind of laid the foundation for me just being willing to try stuff.
Yeah.
And so
absolutely.
that was cool. And I would do that for years and years and years to come. And it would be a big part of who I was.
Yeah.
It taught me how to play music together. And this isn't like church music today with tracks and in-ear monitors. And I mean, you had a projector screen with the actual laminate.
Yeah, I remember those. Yeah.
You had to like lay on top, and you had somebody.
You had to switch them out. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Everything was printed out on paper, and there was maybe a full monitor. So it was. It also kind of bred me into that like, just kind of DIY-ness of it too. That became a big part of my musical journey. I've played a lot of venues where you show up and you're like, well, there's a couple speakers here, and there's a power amp over there. We got two channels, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So that, that playing in like that youth band, youth group band, laid a lot of musical foundations for me that I still carry a lot of that with me and how I operate into everything now. So it was an experience I would completely look back on fondly.
That's so cool. That's awesome, man. So you mentioned the country music. When did you start to kind of delve out of that? And I guess in that time frame where you starting to discover bands and any particular bands that kind of you gravitated to? There
was the you remember Columbia House?
Yes, I do. Oh, yes.
Yeah, like 11 cents or something like that. And you got something like that. You got or something. I remember sending off for that and getting a whole bunch of stuff like Alanis Morissette. What else did I get from them? I can't remember now what exactly it was, but I remember those were like the some of the first CDs I had that I chose
yourself. Yes.
Like picked out from their catalog or magazine or whatever it was. I remember, a lot of that was stuff. I think it was like some 311 in there. Like, I know there was Dave Matthews, and I was like, I don't know about this one, but some of the other stuff like I really connected with and was like, this is cool. And then I got introduced to Tooth and Nail Records kind of through the being in the youth group and stuff like that. Just being around people who are into that kind of stuff. And there were a ton of bands like MXPX and Five Iron Frenzy, who wasn't Tooth and Nail, but was kind of in that world. Starflyer and like bands like that really just started sticking out to me. as I was starting to come into my own musically. And then, bands like, we discovered bands like Further Seems Forever, because I can't remember how we found them. Somewhere in that scene, and then they played in the city we lived in Jackson, and we were like, these guys are really cool.
They're real good.
We wanted to be them, and the bands we were in, we were like, how can we be like them? And then there was a band called The Operation who played.
Yep. Me Without You, previous Me Without You.
Yeah. And so I was like, these guys are cool. And then I was at family Christian bookstores, because that's where you went to buy physical copies of these records. And there was a record that said members of the operation, or something, because they used to put stickers on CDs that were like for fans of, members of, so it was members of the operation or something like that. And it was the first Me Without You, A to B Life record.
Crazy.
And that record was like a spiritual experience in itself. And then of course the subsequent next to Catch Us the Foxes, Brother Sister, those were just, that was
groundbreaking.
Yeah, there was nothing in my life that I had heard that was cooler than that, because I'd gotten into like At the Drive-In and some bands like that, and then there was nothing that was in my world, that was like At the Drive-In, people like that weren't playing in Mississippi.
Yeah.
But Me Without You would come through and play.
That's cool.
Hattiesburg, places that were close enough for us to go. And then I subsequently wound up touring with them a bunch and getting to be friends with some of those guys, and
that's cool.
Love them to this day. Super sweet, just huge impact on my life. But that's jumping way down the road. Other bands that I kind of connected with early on that I would say were sort of foundational would be like Jimmy Eat World.
Great band.
I think Bleed American was technically the first album I heard, but then that introduced me to Clarity. It's just one of the best records that
absolutely
ever been made. I love those guys as far as the way they approach songwriting.
Totally.
The way they approach recording and stuff like that, I think is really noteworthy. I think they you can look at a lot of what they've done. And then Cursive, I kind of got into Cursive for a while, and then we got to play with them a few times. But,
that's cool.
they're one of Me Without You, Cursive. They're two of the bands that just stick out as like super foundational for me, super influential that I really enjoy.
I can hear that in Color Revolt for sure.
Yeah, Color Revolt was super into Cursive and Me Without You and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, Moss Mouse and a lot of that.
Great stuff.
They're another one that kind of sticks out. So I got into stuff like that. It was sort of, branching out into the semi-aggressive sort of indie scene.
Yeah.
And then I got into a lot of like just, I kind of always liked heavier, more aggressive stuff, but then I got into, when we actually started traveling and stuff, we wound up on bills and on tours with bands that were more aggressive, like As Cities Burn, and we would see Norma Jean all the time. They would come. They were from Georgia, so they played Mississippi a good bit. Bands like that I just really loved, and we toured with the Chariot on their first. I think it was the first Chariot tour.
Wow.
And it was just insane.
I bet it was.
I really connected with some heavier stuff as well. But
yeah.
All that's been, let's see if there's anything else that Built to Spill, Death Cab. Radiohead is a band.
Great band. Love those bands.
Luckily been able to see twice and just like changed my whole perception on what music could be.
Yeah.
Like what you can actually do.
They're from another planet, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. that wound up being one of Color Revolt's biggest things was how can we be radio? So we wanted to do things.
No shame in that.
Be a little weirder, be a little more out there, try things that were sort of different.
Yeah.
And so those are all. Man, I'm sure I'm leaving somebody off. That's important. Of course, like 238 was a band.
Oh yeah, Chris is great.
First big deal. They played in Jackson a lot, and we got to play with them some, and then tour with Discover America, the second project that came out of that. But they were, just to see what they could do with barely using overdrives and just being a great band that
Fantastic.
It was really great. Anybody else needed to? Yeah, I got some notes on some might influence it. Pedro the Lion's always been a huge.
Oh yeah, great band.
Man, it's the thing about Dave Bazan and their, I feel like he's had similar journeys, a similar journey to me and a lot of people I know who kind of grew up in that super Christian world, and then started seeing that there was more out there, and that some of the things we had thought might have been a little small-sided and narrowing, and just to see the journey he's been on, I think it's been cool. And then to see where he's at now, making pretty happy records that sound great and are super fun. So I don't know. I feel like we've all kind of been in this world of early to mid 2000s indie rock, and then just to see how that evolution has been cool. And it's cool to see a lot of those bands still doing stuff and
totally
reuniting or doing stuff like that.
Absolutely, that's cool, man. That's awesome. I feel like I have very similar tastes to you, so that's really cool to hear that. I definitely, all those bands you mentioned, I love them dearly. So I get it. It's awesome. I love that they impacted all of us at the same time. It's really cool.
Yeah. It's shout out to them for inspiring a generation.
Shout out to Ruling.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Sweet, man. Well, let's talk about Fletcher, the first band that you had previous to Color Revolt, before it was Color Revolt. So let's talk about how that kind of came together. Yeah.
4 of the guys were in Fletcher that were in Color Revolt, and then we added Sean Kirkpatrick. He came along kind of as we little bit after the change, but sort of to fill everything out and take it to the next level. But I got in that band because my friend Robert Chisholm, who was in Jonesetta, I know you've done an episode on them with Ty Garvey, and me and Ty's lives are very much connected. But he's one of my best friends, so he'll probably come up a lot as we talk about kind of what I've done in the musical world. Robert went to school with some of the guys that were in Fletcher, and then he had come back to Clinton, Mississippi, come back to that school system. And so he knew those guys, and he was very into what they were doing. They were, kind of writing some songs that were pretty deep and sort of complicated for a bunch of, I don't know what we were at the time, 17-year-olds, or maybe not even that. And he was just really into it. And he was like, their bass player just, moved off to go to college or something. And so he was like, they're just playing as a 3-piece, 2 guitars and drums. And he was like, you should go try to play bass for them. Because Robert had played in the youth band that me and Ty were both in. And I had been playing bass in that. And so, he gave me Lynn Clark, the drummer's AIM name, AOL Instant Messenger name. And so I started talking to Lynn on that, and he was just like, why don't you come to one of our practices and play with us? And so I remember coming and kind of just learning some of their songs, and we actually started writing one of the songs. It was either at that first practice or shortly after that would wind up being on that Fletcher Friends Don't Speak record. I believe it was Religion versus Ethics is the name of it, but I don't know what that means. We probably didn't know what that meant at the time either, but it sounded cool. But I remember our first practice was talking about like, oh yeah, we could probably play in Nashville because my sister lived there. And we'd probably do this and that. And I think whether I was any good or not, they were like, oh, we could go do some stuff. So we did really well and wound up, working out, great. So we started playing a lot and writing the songs that would become that record. And we had a guy named Cheney Nichols, who was a Jackson guy. He lives in Memphis now, but he was an attorney here who loved music and loved all, the scene here. Was at every local show. He and his wife Leah were just kind of like the godfathers of the music scene. And he and another guy named Scott Prather, who was in one of our favorite local bands called Bellador. They'd been Ransom Tree. They transitioned into a band called Bellador that was we loved to death. Super good friends of ours. They put out some good records. Maybe just one Bellador record, but those two guys, Scott and Cheney, started a local label called Esperanza Plantation, and it was just a small record label. I don't think we ever signed any documents or committed anything like that. It was very much like I believe in these local bands. I want to help them succeed, and so. Cool. He paid for our first record, which we did with Andrew Goldman in Atlanta. He's the one, he did the Under Oath.
Oh, Matt Goldman?
Yeah, Matt Goldman. Yes, Andrew, somebody else. Matt Goldman. Sorry, Matt.
Yeah. Matt
he did Copeland. He did Under Oath. He did a lot of really great records. And so we got to go record with him in a super legit studio, and he was an awesome guy. We spent the night in the studio and lived there for a week and cranked out this record. And so it was a super awesome experience that we wouldn't have ever gotten to do without Cheney and Scott. And
that's cool.
So, very, very awesome experience. And we loved being a part of that group. Esperanza Plantation, they had a band called Questions and Dialect.
I've heard them, yeah.
Yeah, instrumental band. That's super cool. Cheney was real instrumental in getting the band The Weeks. I don't know if you've heard of them or not. They're out of Nashville now, but they're from Jackson. I think they're on, who they recorded with? I can't remember, but they've gotten a lot of following and toured full time and they're doing it up there. So
that's cool.
They were from Jackson on that label, kind of got going because of them. So it was a very cool thing to have a guy, two guys, sort of they were committing essentially money. To us going and recording, the risks were, pretty low for them. But to say these kids, because we recorded that Fletcher record, 2000, I think it was the fall of 2002.
Wow.
It had to be, because I was a freshman in college, and the other three guys were seniors in high school.
Wow.
Yeah, we were young. And you, when we were, showing up at this guy's studio, and now he's, we didn't realize it, but he was also probably half babysitting us as well. But, he made a great record, and it was super fun to be a part of that.
That's rad. That's awesome.
And then we started touring a good bit after that.
Who were you playing with?
Huh?
Who were you playing with in bands?
Other bands, At Cities Burn.
Yeah.
Onathallo. We toured a lot with Onathallo. What else are we doing? Good bit of folks are there. A band called the Evan Anthem.
Oh yeah, they're great. Great band.
There's some bands from Texas. They wound up being Stella Maris, but they started as something else. And then I think they changed to something else. You know how it is. But, I went to school in Clinton, Mississippi at Mississippi College, and the other three guys all went to Ole Miss, which is in Oxford. So we were living about 2.5 hours apart, but I would, every weekend, I was essentially going to Oxford and staying with them and writing and playing regional shows. We would play either Jackson, Oxford, Memphis, somewhere, Birmingham. We were playing a lot of shows every weekend while being in college.
Yeah.
And we did that for the whole duration of our college lives. And so somewhere in there, about 2000, it was probably 4, early 5, we decided we kind of got the itch to sort of do something different. The sound was evolving.
Sure.
I think kind of a lot of stuff was kind of, we were growing. The crazy thing about all this to think about now where I'm at in my life now is to think about, some of the employees I have in our store or the age I would have been. And I'm like, dang, we were entrusted with a lot. We were
I believe it.
With the not fully formed brains.
Totally.
And I think that would kind of show as we got towards the end of my run, just the conflict that sort of existed there.
Sure.
It was a lot of just growing up and becoming who we were and stuff. But some point around 2004, we decided Fletcher was sort of in the past and we were looking forward. And Jimmy Cajolis, who was in the band, he's got a bunch of books out right now. You should definitely look up.
Oh, that's cool.
He's an author and lives in New York and is killing it. But he's always been a huge reader. This was before Kindles and stuff like that, iPads, anything. So for a tour, he would have just like sacks of books. And we just gave him the shotgun seat in the van because the whole floorboard would just be like stacks of books. And then he would have to like sit cross-legged up there and just read all the time. So he had read the book, I'm blanking on the name now. It just slipped my mind.
I wish I knew because I would tell you, but I don't know.
It's out there. What is it called? I'm blanking on it.
It's okay. It's okay.
I knew it earlier.
The Bible.
It'll come to me in a minute. But in there somewhere was the phrase color revolt. And we just thought that sounded cool and kind of spacey and artistic. And so we decided that was what we were going to be. And we got home from that. We decided that on tour. So like as Fletcher, we decided it kind of midway through a tour. And so we came home and, had probably most of what would become that Color Revolt EP written and had been playing those songs. And so we kind of did a relaunch show at a place called WC Don's that we played at a ton in Jackson. It was a formal brothel / drugged in at multiple points in time. And this dude had letting people play there. And it was very, very, very punk rock. DIY / slightly scary. But we played there all the time. But we did a big show there, kind of relaunching the name, the
That's
new
cool.
name thing. Then started working towards that next album. We added Sean Kirkpatrick, who had become the third guitar player / other vocalist. And he definitely added a little bit of something we didn't have.
Sure.
Probably a little more of the pop elements, the catchy kind of stuff. He had a jazz master, and that kind of punchy, clangy guitar tone he got was something we didn't have. Jess would do something really intricate, like kind of riffy, and Jimmy was doing real atmospheric, kind of incredibly creative, but super like smooth kind of parts. And so it really fit just having the three guitars. And the challenge was to do it in a way where, it was almost never everybody playing the same thing, but to complement rather than to just be loud. The goal was never just to add more volume to do it, but there was parts to be played and to push out. So Sean was a perfect fit for what we were doing, and really kind of took it from that Fletcher was the baby to Color Revolt being more of the teenager, kind of growing into itself and what it would ultimately become. So that rounded it out as the five that would be Color Revolt as I knew it up until 2007.
You mentioned the EP, which is fantastic, by the way. I love it. It's great.
That recording has a story as well.
Well, I was going to ask you, let's talk about that EP briefly, and just looking back on it, just curious how you feel about it, and why wasn't it a full length?
Yeah, the EP, we started recording it, and it wound up just being demos, but we started in Oxford recording with a guy in Esperanza Plantation, paid a bunch of money, for us to record with this guy. It was, a lot of amps and guitars, like cool stuff. And so, we would try different amps, different guitars and stuff on every song. And it was just kind of all over the place because we were, again, young and didn't know what we were doing. But it didn't sound like us. We weren't happy with it. So it wound up never being what people heard. It wound up just being demos. But in 2000, what year did Katrina hit? Was it 05?
Oh, was that? Probably about that. Yeah, probably about that.
Right after Katrina, like most of Jackson didn't have power, but we were set to record at I think it was a house. It was Cheney's house. It was Cheney Nichols from Esperanza Plantation's house. That we wound up recording in, I'm pretty sure. And with just the guy that I actually replaced, the first bass player that moved to college and opened up the spot for me to join Fletcher, he actually recorded that EP. His name's Stephen Bevilacqua. And he's done some cool stuff since, but he was just like, you guys are using your guitars and your amps. That we're recording this just like it would be y'all playing a live show. And it really captured our sound more. And it was just great. But it was right after that, like I think the block of houses that we recorded in had power and no one else did. It was a great experience because it was more intimate. It wasn't in a big fancy studio with vintage gear. It was like Steven's recording set up in Cheney's house in the spare bedroom, and it was much more organic and much more us. And it wound up being something that we were really, really proud of.
Sure.
The way that it all shaped up and turned out.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I do love it. That's actually when I first discovered you guys personally, and just, I had seen the name, and then I finally heard it, and I was like, oh, this is great. After that EP came out, what was the touring like? Did it ramp up quite a bit, and were you kind of touring with the same bands that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of always toured in and out with Susburn and Apollo. Those are bands we just were good friends with.
Yeah.
A lot of tours with Apollo. But then in 2006, we got on with Brand New.
Wow.
They had recorded their demos for what would be The Devil and God. They recorded the demos and stuff for that in Oxford, and so they had we didn't ever meet them while they were actually in Mississippi, but they met a bunch of people that we knew and kind of got introduced to us that way. And they asked us to come play at Johns Hopkins. They hadn't played a show in like 3 years or something like that. They had only been writing and recording, and then had just taken kind of a hiatus. But they were playing their first show in a long time at Johns Hopkins, and they asked us to come play. Their booking agent kind of reached out to us, and he was interested in picking us up, and so we left. I think got out of school. The guys got out of school on like a Friday. And we drove up there. I think it was my senior year, so I was at school too. So we drove up all the way for that show, and then it was awesome. It was like full student body, kind of large, biggest crowd we'd ever played for. And maybe 1,200 or something like that. I don't know exactly, but it was a lot. And it was one of their first shows in forever, and so they had a ton of people come, and it was. Huge stage, huge crowd. We were just like, this is way cooler than playing some of the places we've been playing over the years.
Yeah.
We played that show. We kind of knew it was sort of an audition as well. We knew it was more than just a show. We knew that their booking agent Andrew was looking at us, and so
was it Andrew Ellis?
Yeah.
I used to book shows, so I know the name.
Yeah, so he did pick us up, and we started doing more tours. But that was 2006, and then I had graduated college. I had moved to Oxford, where my girlfriend, who became my wife, was living, and where the whole band lived. And so I was like, everything in my life is in Oxford. I'm going to move to Oxford. But I was 23 years old, had a Christian studies degree, moved to Oxford, another college town. I couldn't even get a job washing dishes at a Mexican restaurant. Like, I tried everything. The only job I could get was substitute teaching at 2 different schools. And in a whole semester, I got called 7 times. So that's not enough to pay rent and live your life on. I was getting paid $2 for every Color Revolt T-shirt we sold. I would ride my bike to the post. I would package it, ride my bike to the post office, and mail it out. So that was my portion. So I was just essentially destitute, not making any money at all. And Jesse Lacey from Brand New came to Oxford just to hang out and spend the weekend. And he was going to play a solo acoustic show. And, it was great. Like, it was a super fun weekend, super fun show. But we were just hanging out, and he was just like, come on the road with us. He's like, what are y'all going to be doing, the next semester? And I was like, well, the guys are trying to finish school up. And so they're going to, I think they were juniors maybe. There was like, they're taking a lot of classes. We're really just going to try and practice and write. We're not going to do a ton of shows during the next semester. And he was like, come be our guitar tech on our Europe tour. And I was like, Europe tour? And he was like, yeah, we're doing UK and Europe.
Wow.
And it was like January and February of 2007. And so I was like, I talked to the guys about it, and they were like, yeah, if that's what you want to do, like, you'll make a ton of money. For that point in my life, it was the most money I'd ever imagined.
Sure.
And so I was just like, and as a chance to go to all these places. And so I was like, I really want to do it. And they were like, look, we're taking it easy. This will help you. You'll come back with a lot of money. You'll be able to kind of relax a little bit. And so I went and did that tour. It was life-changing. Me Without You was actually the opener on that tour.
Wow, that's cool.
And so I got to see Me Without You play like 30, 40 something times, in a row, and got to hang out with those guys a lot. And so, it was a great experience.
Yeah.
Was I a good guitar tech? Probably not. It was I'd never done it before, and then they were like, "Yeah, you're gonna be, one of our two techs." And so I had Vinny and Derek. I did. Jesse hired me, but I wasn't his guitar tech. I was the other two guys, and so it was super fun. I learned a ton. Very, very fond memories of that. But
That's awesome.
coming back from that tour, knowing a couple of different things, knowing I definitely wanted to spend my life with my wife, Allie, who was my girlfriend at the time. So whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to do it with her. And then knowing that, I still wanted to do music. But that was kind of, everything sort of got thrown in my face at that point. Reality hit hard because I got back from that tour and we were set to practice. We were going to have kind of a meeting, a catch-up meeting, and I was going to tell them about, I talked to them about you dudes. I talked to, I made a lot of connections, and I was like,
Sure.
There's things we can build on from this, because I did this guitar tech tour. It can benefit Colorado. We were gearing up for some different things and getting real excited about stuff. Andrew had gotten us on some good dates, I think, that were coming up. And we sat down at the house that me and Jimmy and another guy shared. And they just kind of straight out were just like, "We don't want you to be in the band anymore."
Whoa.
So it was coming off a pretty high tour in Europe and UK and getting to see all that and getting to see how the behind the scenes stuff in a tour like that works. It was just like pretty big shock to the system.
Yeah.
To think like, oh, this is because it wasn't just not, we don't want to hang out with you anymore. It was essentially getting fired from a business you created.
Yeah.
So you helped create. And so there was a lot of reasons that they had. They didn't feel like I was contributing much to the songwriting, which was difficult to do because Sean and Jess were both the primary songwriters and had very, very strong opinions. I'd been taken aside by one of the guys at one point in time and told, "Hey, if they want it to be a certain way, let's just do it that way." And so I was like, "All right." I was pretty easy to please with songwriting, but
Yeah.
they didn't feel like I was having the contribution on that. It was just in a point where I was not playing super well. We had done some demos with a guy named Jimbo Mathis. He was in the Squirrel Nut Zippers, and he's like
Oh, nice.
an artist and stuff. He's got a little studio in Como, Mississippi. We had done some demos there, and I did not do well. I played pretty poorly. But it was also a point in my life where we were starting to use like in-ears for click when we recorded, and it was stuff like that I just had never been taught how to do.
Sure.
I learned it eventually, but it was pretty new to me, and like that experience with that. That being my first experience and then being graded on that was probably fair, but there were excuses. I had excuses, but
Sure.
I know now that those don't amount to much. But as a 23-year-old, you had excuses for everything. So I could explain away anything that I did wrong, and essentially say, "Well, it's probably somebody else's fault." But there had been some mental health stuff develop in all of us. I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but for myself, I would not be diagnosed with depression and anxiety until I was like 30, 8 years old. And so I lived with that and struggled with that for a long time. And it affected how I think me not being in that band was a direct result of things I wasn't dealing with from a mental health perspective, from just a growing up perspective. We started to clash a lot, me and some of the guys.
Yeah.
I was taking on a lot when we had a tour manager named Palmer that was a saint, that was just super awesome, but he didn't get to go on every tour. He was another college student guy. And so a lot of the tours we went on, I was like de facto tour manager slash tour dad slash every question had to go through me, but I was also playing everything and like having to settle up all the money. Dealing with the guest list. And I was overwhelmed,
Sure.
And,
Sure.
did not know how to cope and deal with that kind of stuff. 10 years ago, I probably would have still been like just overwhelmed and, it's not my fault. But now, as you get older, you can kind of start looking back and say, well, you know what, like, it sucked. It was a devastating thing that them kicking me out of the band. But, I wasn't, I was to blame as well. There's blame to go around everywhere.
Sure.
I'm not going to harp on their faults. That doesn't benefit anybody. This isn't a reality show. You drag up that kind of garbage. But it is a good example of kind of what growing up looks like and the conflicts and things that come about because you're becoming a person, fully fledged,
a grown up.
I brought a lot of the conflict to that table, and I take my responsibility for my faults in that, for for my personality conflicts, for the musical aspect of it. Like I could have worked harder on that.
Sure.
Poor thing, there were depression elements to that really held me back, and it would be decades before I even began to deal with any of that. And so,
no, I get that.
It was a traumatic event in my life.
I'm sure it was.
Because it not only changed what I was doing as a career path, it was also like, oh dang, I live here because of this, solely because of this. And my girlfriend, I was like, my girlfriend's not making me any money, so I was like, I can't just stay in this town because, and it's super awkward to be living with the guys that just kicked you out of their hands. By the time I got back from Europe, they had already been practicing with Patrick, who would replace me. And so, it changed my trajectory, because now I was like, well, what am I going to do? And so my friend Emmy Sprayberry, she knew a guy named Cheney, not the same Cheney from Desperados Position, but there's a lot of Cheneys in my life. The Cheney that I currently work for had just grown his store to include a skate park that was also a music venue. He needed somebody to move back and run the music venue. And so who knew that scene, knew how that stuff worked. And so I'd had a lot of experience booking shows and stuff like that. And so I moved back to Jackson and took that job and wound up really loving it. It was super awesome. I only wound up doing it for 7 months, because then I got into grad school in Memphis and wound up moving. But then after I finished grad school, I came back. And he had moved the store. He didn't have the park and the venue anymore, but still got back in that.
That's cool.
It was a big thing. Like I'm doing what I'm doing now, sort of in part because of all that. But in that period of time, I was super discouraged and I did not feel like I could play music. I felt like with these guys who I've been playing music with for all these years, essentially told me I'm not good enough at music. to be in their band. And so I was just like, I can't do this. But I had been with Brand New in Europe, and I had made this chunk of money that I didn't really have much to do with anymore, since I was back home living with my parents because I didn't know what else to do. But for the meantime, for that kind of 7-month period, I wound up buying a guitar, bought a thin line Telly, and started getting a few pedals. And then my brother, who was 16 years older than me, had always been kind of my biggest supporter in music.
Yeah.
He and my mom would drive to see, they came to the Brand New tour, and I think Dallas, because it was the closest one. Like, he was at as much as he could be, just super supported what we were doing. And he was like, I'm gonna, he's like, you can do music. He's like, you can start another band. Because he had kind of asked me, like, what are you doing now? And I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I and he's like, you should start another band. And I was like, I can't start a band and write songs and do all the stuff. It's just like, I'm not good enough, And he was like, bullshit, like you can do it, And so he bought me a Fender Deluxe guitar amp, and bought me a couple pedals, and all this different stuff. And it's just like, do it. Like, you can do it. You want to do it.
Yeah.
I want to do, but I just don't feel like I can. So he bought me this stuff, and he was like, now you have to do it. And so I started a band with a couple of my friends who were sort of like in the same position as me, like sort of music world outcast. No one else had really given a chance. Me and my friend Don started a band called Captain and Company.
Yeah.
And there's one song that you can probably look up on Spotify and Apple Music and stuff now, called "Once Was an Optimist." But we released 2 albums. I just haven't. I need to put those up one day. I just never have. But we recorded it all ourselves with our friend Tony. We recorded our first record in a trailer in the middle of nowhere that had no running water. Wow. You just went and peed outside or poured jugs of water in the toilet.
Crazy.
He had no running water, but he had power, and he had a small little studio, and he was our drummer. So we recorded with him, and it was a super cool experience, just being out in the middle of nowhere, drinking beer and recording songs. Yeah. It was a very awesome. Cool experience. And it really just, that band, even though it doesn't mean much to the rest of the world, means a lot to me, because it really, when I think of redemption, it really is kind of a story of redemption for me, because I kind of got, I crashed and burned, and then out of the ashes sort of rose up again because of my brother, who was such an encouragement. And even though it did, like, we played a lot of shows. I moved to Memphis. Don wound up moving to Memphis as well, and just kind of doing whatever. So the whole time I was in grad school, we were just still doing Captain and Company. We would play a lot of shows in Memphis, and we just had a great time. It was just super fun to do. And was it great? Probably not, but it was fun. It was creative in our way. It was everything we wanted it to be. And there wound up being like 30 different people that were in that band at one point in time. Wow. People would move, we would move. Eventually I moved back to Jackson after I got married, and we kind of restarted the band again with Ty Garvey and our friend Casey Cumbus and another guy named Dustin. It was super fun just to kind of do it. It had a lot of different iterations, but the version you can hear that song, "Once Was an Optimist," was Ty and Casey and them.
Cool.
So it was kind of the last iteration of it. But, super fun just to kind of get back into it and say, like, what, I can do this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, my brother wound up in 2016. He died from from cancer. He had
Sorry.
lung cancer that just kind of took over. He fought it for 9 years, which is most people don't get to do. Fight it that long and that hard, but he got to really stretch it out. And, 3 different battles with it, 3 different comebacks, and then before he finally just couldn't go anymore. But because of his influence on me, because of his the way he encouraged me and supported my art. I have a tattoo of one of the images from that first Captain Company record, because it's called I Was Born in the House My Grandfather Built. And I have a tattoo of some of that artwork because it reminds me, one, of just like redemption.
Sure.
All things are possible. You're never just completely down and out. And 2, just how supportive and influence he was in my life.
That's awesome.
It always reminds me of that. So that project is super important to me.
Sure.
No matter what, and I'll always be grateful for it.
That's cool, dude. I love that. I mean, so sorry to hear about your brother passing, but what a testament, to not only who he was, but the influence he was in your life, and the fact that you look back on that fondly, and it's something that, like you said, you went from crashing and burning to picking up the pieces, and your brother was your biggest cheerleader. I love that. That's beautiful. I love hearing that. So is that kind of what led into Don Quixote's horse? I know you mentioned Ty playing with you. Let's talk about Don Quixote's. I love it. Ty, I had him on the podcast recently. So cool, so awesome. And he mentioned it, and I had never heard it, and checked it out. Really dug it, man. I was in there.
I love what we're doing right now because it's like we love that people like it when they like it, but the most important thing is that we like it and that we're having fun.
That's great. Absolutely.
I'm a 40-year-old dad, and so getting to go travel and play shows and hang out with 3 of my best friends is like, it's art and it's a band. It's also most of my social life at this point in time.
Sure. No, totally.
So, it's super fun to be a part of. We, Ty, he's moved back and forth between here and Memphis, Tennessee, like 15 times. But one of the times he had moved back here, he asked our friend Jason from Memphis was in town staying with him, and he wanted to, we were hanging out, and he was like, "You want to play through the song I started writing?" We started playing it, and it wound up being the song "Trust" that's on our first EP that we did, and fantastic EP, and it was super cool. We were just like, "This is awesome." Yeah. I've been trying to get him to write more songs and kind of be more in the front for a long time, just because I thought Ty was so talented. I'd done tons of church music stuff with Ty. Yeah. We had been in our first band we were ever in together. It was called We're Not Ugly. It was. Yeah,
I think he mentioned that. I think he did.
You mentioning that too. Don't go look that up. You won't find it. If you do, I'll find you and destroy it. But, it has gone awful, but it was our first kind of
foray into it.
Together, and then we did a lot of other. We were always just jamming, like at Robert from Jenzetta's house. We would have a different band every couple of weeks, and that was just like a joke. And then the joke of Jenzetta became a real thing. But we were always all playing music together and just having a good time. It was how we hung out. It was fun for us. And so me and Ty's music lives have always kind of intersected. It's kind of funny that our big things we did with Jenzetta and Colorable, that neither of us were in either. Like we were in both of those bands. I feel like I should have been in that band, or he should have been in Colorable. But that was pretty much the only time our musical careers really diverged. But he had started writing these songs, and we started messing around with them, and that took shape. And eventually we were like, we should play a show. And so we had a show opportunity came up in Memphis, and I was just like, let's do it.
That's awesome.
That'll make us finish these songs.
Yeah, exactly.
And it did. It made us finish the songs we were working on, and actually start working on recording those and everything. So it really started taking shape into something that was fun. That was nostalgic for us, because our influences are very much what people I mentioned earlier. And a lot more. But just the kind of early indie rock vibes from our early indie rock vibes from like that early 2000s period. That we were just like, we want to do stuff like this. We don't really want to do stuff, anything different. So we just started working on stuff that we liked and that was fun for us. And it's what it is today. So
that's awesome. I love it. Yeah, so did you get to open for like Colony House or somebody like that? Or I thought I read that.
We played a little mini fest in Covington, Louisiana this past year. And we were one of the openers for those guys. Yeah, they were super fun.
That's awesome.
Probably one of the bigger shows we've played, for sure. It's kind of an opening of a new coffee house cocktail bar
that's awesome.
That decided, for their grand opening deal, booked a little festival.
That's so cool. I love that, man. I love that. I love that you guys can just kind of do it at your own pace, have fun with it, enjoy it, no pressure, no touring, just show here and there, hang out, drink beer, do your thing.
We played 8 shows last year, and we were like, that's a pretty good number. Some dudes in there.
That's awesome, though.
Well, one dude's in his late 20s, but then the rest of us are 40 or closer to 40.
Sure.
So, we had a great time with it. We got to tour. We did a little weekend tour, and we'll probably do some more stuff like that this coming year.
That's exciting.
We're set to record a third EP, a little bit longer. We might even, instead of 3 songs, we might even do 5 this time. We're working on that now. We've got a studio in Memphis we're going to do that in. Ty's going to do most of the mixing and mastering and stuff on that. And, we're pretty proud of it. I think it's a good jump from kind of where we've been to where we're kind of going. And a little bit more of a maturing of the sound and stuff like that. So,
that's awesome. I love hearing that.
We're excited to see what it sounds like.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to hear it too. That's really cool. I love hearing that, man. Well, I know you just mentioned the future for that band, but what does the future look like for you in general? How do you feel the future looks for you?
My kid's going to be 4, and then 5, and then 6, and then we're going to keep going from there. That's it right now. I mean, we're looking at what school she's going to go to next year, that kind of thing. So we're the business side is we're trying to grow and develop that, see what we could potentially do on that front, and what we can turn that into. Musically, we just want to keep plugging away. Like I think all of us are kind of in this Don Quixote's horse deal for as long as it's feasibly possible, and then probably some after that. So we just want to keep doing what we're doing, playing shows, and hopefully get to play for more and more people. But the goal is to make art and have a good time, and hopefully those things we'll get to keep doing.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. That's awesome. Drew, this has been such a cool conversation, man. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and hanging out and telling me your past and your story. Yeah, man. You're awesome. I really appreciate you coming on, and man, hopefully we'll get to meet in person sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll come play up there.
Okay, sounds good, buddy. All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you to the listener for tuning in again. I really, really, really appreciate it. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, all the nice messages you've sent. I really appreciate it. Thank you to Drew Mellon. Awesome conversation. Thank you for your time. It was awesome to get to know you. So thank you again, Drew. Amazing artists on the horizon, guys. And nostalgia, it's still a heck of a drug.